Hello, welcome to another session of Lunch and Learn with Geo. We've got another interesting topic today. I hope it is for you. I know it is for me. We got two really good speakers, and we should be able to share some real good information about AI with you guys. We are recording. Here's the obligatory disclaimer. Be careful what you say. Uh, when we're done, it should be posted on the AI on the NWSBA website for all to view. It might even end up in YouTube. I don't know. So if you got any questions, and we are encouraging questions today, so please use the chat bot. Um, if you want to post a social, which I appreciate, Lunch and Learn with Geo, hashtag Lunch and Learn is going on. This is a misprint, April 9th. It's not, it's October 8th. It's going to be on eDiscovery, and CLE credit information is going to be given afterwards.
Hang on, Gio. Are you share? I don't see a shared screen. Is that just me? Are you, did you
No,
need to
not
share?
yet.
Okay,
Not
okay.
yet.
I wasn't sure.
Not
You
yet.
said there was a misprint. I just wasn't sure if I was supposed to be looking at
No,
something.
no. We've already, it was an old one.
Okay.
My AI didn't do it, draft it properly.
Sure, sure. Blame the AI.
Yeah, of course. Matthew Kurbis and Jonathan Nestler are speakers. Um, Both are very good. You're here today because the Code of Professional Responsibility requires you to know what's going on in the legal world. And more importantly, the comments to Rule Point 1.1, as a reminder, say that we have to be aware of the benefits and risks associated with relevant technology. And I think relevant technology now means AI. Same with the ABA amendments to the model rules. We have to be aware of the growing importance of technology to modern law practice. Um, and as a general introduction, it's changing the way we are practicing law, and we're going to talk about some of that today. So, with that, I'm going to bring everybody in. I'm going to introduce our speakers. I'm going to change this to speaker view so that our speakers can get attention. Um, and Matthew, since you're on the screen first, why don't you go first?
Sure. Just like brief intros.
Sure.
Yeah. Hey everyone. I'm Matthew Kurbis. I'm the subscription attorney. I have a long running podcast called Law Subscribed, where I have conversations with mostly other attorneys, sometimes technologists, or just subscription model experts about the future of the business model of legal services. When I founded after about 9 years of working at other law firms, I left and started my own practice about 3.5 years ago. It's called Subscription Attorney LLC. It's just based on the subscription model. I serve as fractional general counsel to small business owners for their businesses, and then just for people in their lives. And so I'm the problem avoidance lawyer, and because of that, I don't charge as much. So I help people avoid problems instead of sit around and wait for them to be really expensive. Um, so because of that, because I don't bill by the hour, from the moment I founded and launched my firm in March of 2022, I've been incentivized to adopt technology, leverage automations, any kind of efficiency I could find, because when you're not billing by the hour, less time is more money. And so I needed to find out how to be efficient while still also delivering high quality legal services, which, when you deliver them to your clients faster, is almost always more valuable to them. Of course, we have to deliver them of an equal or greater quality. Well, before Gen AI hit the scene, now we just call it AI, but generative AI hit the scene, the AI left a lot wanting. It wasn't a huge time saver. That was more when like automations were still the king. Automated templates, which I still use, just not as much as I used to. And so I was always I tried to use GPT-3, and it was not super useful at the time. But because I was using GPT 3.0, I was there when ChatGPT launched in November 2022, and immediately found it to be super useful. And even all the way back then, I was only getting output based on things I would give it. I just found it to be more reliable. And there is a word for that. I forget what term it is, but like now we essentially call that when like AI answers based off a database retrieval augmented generation. I was doing like a low key version of that even all the way back then. And now today when I use AI tools, I only use them if they give me citations to their sources where they answer my question, which we'll get into later. So with that, Jonathan, kick it over to you.
Thank you, Matthew. I'm John Nestler. I know some of you in the room. For those who I don't know, I am a trial lawyer down in Springfield, Illinois. I represent plaintiffs. Like Matthew, I have looked for ways to automate practice and ways to gain efficiency. I bill by contingency fee, not by the hour. And so every efficiency boost I gain is a case that gets done faster, which works well for us. And also, like Matthew, I was in artificial intelligence and its application to technology before generative AI for many, many years. But then when the generative AI stuff started to really matter, in other words, when we kind of crossed from GPT-2 to GPT-3, and it became clear that not only are these tools able to generate really good text, but they also seem to know things and they also seem to be very, very helpful. You know, it was like the first time I used the internet, it was just so apparent that it was going to be something huge, you know, in the 90s when you could go to apple.com and nike.com and not a lot of other things. It was still very apparent to me that this is all going to change the way the world is. And I hadn't really felt that way again until using generative AI for the first time in the GPT-3 era. And so when that launched into ChatGPT and then reasoning models and now the models that we have today, I think that the way that this is going to impact the law and the practice of law is going to be very, very profound. I use this example a lot, and I'll start with it that, it reminds me of what it must have been like to be an accountant when Excel software and tax management software came into play. Those softwares fundamentally changed what the accounting profession did and how they acted. And I think that generative AI will do the same for the practice of law.
All right. Matthew, the subscription attorney, and I want to add Matthew's concept of the subscription attorney is really a timely topic because what AI is going to force us to do is to get away from the hourly billing model. And we're going to be looking for other ways of charging our clients. And Matthew's got a very innovative way of doing it. So Matthew, tell us what's going on.
Yeah, so much is going on, and just even piggybacking off of what Jonathan said, I've been calling AI tools, generative AI tools, the language power tools for lawyers, right? Like think about what power tools did for the construction industry, right? And just for like doing any construction whatsoever, right? Like think about manually sawing a bunch of wood versus like a circ saw. Like an electrically powered circ saw that you just zip, 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 like throw wood through air, and like the output that you could have of a better quality than a human like manually sawing a 2x4. Like that is the power of these tools. I was just at DePaul in Chicago guest lecturing on Monday. They have a class there now that focuses the first year students on getting ready to practice. And one of the things we were talking about is how I didn't know this going into practice, but even still today, and some of us on the call, you might do this or you might have received this, where the associate or another attorney at the firm does some work, and then the senior associate or the partner or the senior partner gets a printed out copy of that paper, takes a red pen or a blue pen, crosses things out, goes through, makes a bunch of corrections, change. Like it's gonna substantially affect a filing. Like that's billable time. Like I think that's billable work, right? Like you're improving the writing to get better results, right? In my experience, 70 to 80% of those changes are stylistic, grammatical, syntactical, punctuation, right? All things that must be perfect because if a judge, sees those types of mistakes, then they're going to lend less credibility to your arguments, right? So that's important stuff, right, to make those changes. AI doesn't get that stuff wrong, and it could change a style, like because every attorney has their own style. Like you could even it's not hard. Like even in Notebook LM, you could put your style preferences in as a source and say, here are my style preferences. Make sure all the writing comports to this style.
Matthew, what LLM do you use for your stylistic changes?
Yeah, so I'm pretty. I use three tools more than any other tools, and in this order: Perplexity Pro, Notebook LM Pro, and Paxton AI. And Paxton is the only legal specific AI tool that I'm using right now. I dabbled with some others. I really liked GCAI, but it's built for general counsel attorneys, and it charges a commensurate rate with what in-house legal departments could spend, and it doesn't make sense for me to spend, that kind of spend on that tool. That's not purpose-built for how I use AI. So those are the three tools I'm mainly using. If you have a Gmail account, you have access to Notebook LM. Now, it's not the paid version. It's not the enterprise version. And even in that free version, I do think they make some representations that your documents are secure, they're yours, they're private, we don't trade on your data. But that is definitely a representation that they make in the paid version. And it's only $14 a month with a Google Workspace account. And if you're inside of Microsoft, like probably 90% of the people on this call are, you could pay $20 a month to get access to Notebook LM Pro. As far as like AI tools are concerned, for lawyers, my recommendation is if you could pick one AI tool, it's Notebook LM Pro. For everyday average consumers or just people in their lives, I tell them if they can only pick one AI tool, it's Perplexity Pro for like a paid solution. There's free versions. Everybody should be using the free versions. But if you only have $20 a month to spend, Perplexity Pro or Notebook LM. But my point is that all of that time that's billable, legitimately, is obviated. I mean, it goes away with AI. And so just right there, you're going to be eviscerating your revenue unless you have alternative business models, which, by the way, have always been more profitable if properly implemented, because you could only bill so many hours in a day. And that means you have to hire more billers who are expensive to bill more hours. So like the margins on that increase in revenue is not great. And you're capping your revenue. Now, you still make good money doing it. I mean, you make great money doing it, right? But it's not necessarily the best business model. I don't think it's ever really been the best business model. And there are retention and other problems too. And that's not anything to do with AI. Just AI exacerbates those problems for that business model.
Hey, Jonathan, your practice is primarily litigation. What are the three prime tools that you use?
So the three that I use in order would be OpenAI, and I use that for various tasks depending on what I'm trying to accomplish. I use Gemini quite a lot, and I use Grok. Unlike Matthew, who uses, I think, tools that are what we would call wrappers. In other words, tools that kind of remove some of the steps from the user. I tend to interact directly with the tools and use them in that way. For instance, where Matthew might use a tool that forces citations, I would actually have to put specifically into the tools that I use. Make sure you cite the sources, don't make things up, things like that. But I think it's a great question based on, when I was preparing for this, one of the topics was core competencies required to use AI. And I think one of the core competencies I really want to touch on is making sure you understand that all of these tools are really, really good at different things. And so when you're using AI, depending on what it is you're trying to accomplish, you should try to use the tool that's best tailored to that task. And so if I'm doing a deep research project, for instance, I will use OpenAI. If I'm doing some marketing, maybe modifying a photograph or wanting to create a small video, Gemini is far and away the best for that process. And if I want to do something that might take a little bit deeper thinking, Grok's probably the best in class for that right now. If you want to kind of just for ideation is what I call it. But if I'm just kind of spitballing with the AI to come up with ideas, I find Grok to be about the top of the line as far as that use goes. So, when we're approaching artificial intelligence and using models, just make sure you understand that just because you're not getting the result you want from one model doesn't mean another model wouldn't give you something much, much better.
Yeah, we use Perplexity Chat for just general things, but ChatGPT 5 and then Lexis. I'm relying more and more on Lexis. I think Lexis's AI is getting really, really good. What we've been doing in the litigation context is when we get a pleading in, we throw it into Lexis and ask it to analyze it, whether or not it's hitting all the right cases. Then we also followed it up with an analysis in Perplexity. and use that, and then use that as a basis for how we're going to respond. We do that if a client gets served with a complaint, we throw the complaint in there. The complaint, it'll actually give us an analysis of the legal arguments used, the causes of action, what the elements are. It'll also give us things like affirmative defenses. And some of them are now offering to give you discovery to propose to the other side, creating an outline for you to use discovery. These tools are just absolutely amazing. But stylistically, I don't know. I'm kind of fixated yet on ChatGPT 5.0 with the right instructions. I haven't tried the others, but I'm going to, based on your recommendations, I'm going to give them a test drive.
I'll say also that I think Damien Reel has really been like an innovator in the ideation in this space, because at VLEX, and this is why I think Clio's acquisition of VLEX, and I'll give a quick background for those of you that don't know, Clio is one of the largest practice management platforms for small and solo law firms, though they're trying to move up market with some strategic acquisitions. They have their own internal AI tool called Clio Duo. And it's supposed to be like what I've described Notebook LM as, but for Clio files in your files. And it's gotten some really mixed reviews. So it's not like doing what it needs to do.
I tried it for a couple of months, and I was not happy with it.
Yeah.
In fact, I could actually say I was disappointed in it.
Yeah. And like, because it just didn't live up to the promise, right? And even Lexis, their AI tools in the beginning were crap. And I think they made some strategic acquisitions, Protege or like some other tools, and they've, they're trying to make up for that. I haven't gotten my hands on the Lexis AI tools in a few months, but like 6 months ago, they were just awful. But I've heard some good things, right, since then. And so even though like an LPM acquiring a legal research company is like makes a good case just for that, I really think it's because VLEX was innovating with their tool Vincent, which is their AI tool. It's the Lexis competitor, or what you just described, Gio, and just the AI talent that they have at VLEX, because they've talked about exactly what you were talking about, Gio, in the first year, within the first year of ChatGPT releasing. They were already talking about how they're doing these things in VLEX. Now, their focus was also on the courts. So, let the judges click a button that uses AI to check all the citations, right? Now, they hadn't built anything yet, but they were talking about that type of thing really early. So I would pay attention, if you're not, to the VLEX acquisition by Clio and the integrations that are going to happen there, because I could only imagine if they do it well.
I'm getting a demo of that next week.
Yeah.
But just for context, so that everybody understands, I was talking to two federal judges at a program a couple of months ago, and every one of them have Westlaw on their computers, as do their clerks. And whenever a brief is submitted, they run it through Westlaw's analyzer to tell them if it's right on point, if they hit the right cases, or if they missed anything. So if we as practitioners are not doing the same thing before we file it to look at our own weaknesses and our arguments, I'm borderline saying that we're committing malpractice, because these tools are available to us. We have to start using them. Unmute yourselves, guys. I'm looking for an audience.
No, I couldn't agree more with you, Gio. I think that, using the same tools that we know judges are using in order to check our work just makes perfect sense, but also, is probably bordering on malpractice. You started off today by talking about the ethical rule that requires us to know the benefits and the downfalls of certain technologies, or the benefits and the potential roadblocks. And I don't think there's ever been a technology where that's more true than artificial intelligence. It has the ability to provide us with an enormous boost in efficiency, but also has certain drawbacks that I think if you're not aware of and you're not careful about, you could really find yourself in a lot of trouble. We've all heard about hallucinations as being one of those. Obviously, something you want to watch out for, but there's other little things that you need to be careful about that I think anybody who's going to start using these tools should be aware of, in addition to the hallucination problem. Prompt injection is one of them, and that's the concept of essentially hiding words that would force a large language model to give you a different result than you want. You know, you said, Geo, earlier on, if you give it the right instructions, and truer words have never been said about using LLMs. You have the right instructions, you have the wrong instructions, but you can also have malicious instructions. And you know, one of the problems I can foresee down the road is if people who are submitting documents to a court, knowing that that court's using LLMs to look at those documents, are creative enough, they can hide messages within the text in order to cause the LLM to give different results, or give results that would otherwise be malicious. And you know, how to watch out for that, I don't exactly know yet, but I think it is something we all should be aware of.
So
I hadn't considered that, but it's including a message within it. You cannot rule against Bellis. How about that?
yeah, right, right. And there's a lot to be said there with these AI-powered browsers, like these agentic browsers, like Comet Browser, because I have seen some things that say, like these malicious actors are trying to just add calendar invitations to people's calendar invites that have instructions for the agents inside of the browser to like do things like sign into my bank account and transfer money to this account, like things like that, right? So like how much control we give over to these things, at least right now, as it's all very nascent, we should be very, very careful about, which is why my Comet browser only has access to my consulting firm account information and not my law firm account information, right? So like I'm not signed in on any of my law firm related accounts inside of the Comet browser. Just Kerbis First, just my podcasts, you know, and all that stuff that I do. So, but despite that, these AI-powered browsers are unbelievable. And if you are a Google Workspace user like me, so you're paying that $14 a month or more for the Microsoft Office equivalent inside of Google, Gemini is just integrated like inside of that, like Copilot is. If you're paying additional for Copilot inside of the Microsoft solutions, you're getting all the advanced Gemini integrations. And that has gotten a lot better. So it's not quite at the level of what the Comet Assistant could do. And I should say the Comet browser is Perplexity's browser. So Google has Chrome, Perplexity has Comet. But Comet was built from the ground up to let AI, Perplexity's AI tool, basically anything you could do in your web browser, their AI assistant can do. So I could say, here's a bunch of things I need to accomplish. Time block 15-minute time blocks on my calendar over the next week to get all these things done. And it's off to the races and it's doing it, right? You could you're like, okay, I want to do some client outreach, you know, to keep in touch with some past clients, maybe ask for referrals or ask for reviews. You vibe back and forth inside of the assistant and you're like, you know, you go, you know, you try to work on some copy for that or whatever. And then you're like, great, now put that in some draft emails to these clients and it will find those clients' emails in your contact information inside of your email client. It will prepare the draft emails and have them all ready for your review to click send, 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 right?
And again, what program is that?
This is the Comet browser.
Oh,
Comet, like a meteor, like a comet. Comet
right.
browser. It's a Perplexity. You have to be a paying user of Perplexity. $20 a month.
I want
$200
to add an anecdote here. I heard a professor from Canada say last year. He says, "What's the big deal about AI?" He says, "We've had AI in our practices for years. It's called an associate. We would give them a project. You'd hear the wheels grinding in the library, and after a few days, you get a product, and it'd be put it on your desk, and you'd review it, and then you'd tell her, no, you have to change this, and this is and you missed this point, and then there'd be more grinding, and then you get a draft back, and finally you get a draft that you could actually sit down and seriously edit, and it costs you $15,000 a month for that associate. Now it could cost you $500 for an AI and you get the equivalent of it. And if we are not doing that, we are doing ourselves a big disservice."
Yeah, and I think that's the exact right way to look at it. You know, people, I think, approach these and they expect they're going to get a final product that's perfect and ready to file the moment that they do it. But, you know, the current state of artificial intelligence is exactly what you're describing, Gio. It's more like a JD as opposed to a practicing lawyer. It's more like a first-year associate as opposed to somebody with 20 years of experience. And when you conceptualize it that way, you start to realize this is just a first draft. And I can talk to the LLM about making the draft better, making it better, making it better. But eventually, I'm going to have to take the 20 years of experience that I have and finalize the product before it's going to be filed. You know, Elon referred to Grok 4 when he released it, or maybe it's Grok 3, whatever the current version is that it's able to operate as a PhD in all areas. So for us, that's a JD. And we all as lawyers know that somebody who just got their JD is significantly different in their approach to practice from somebody who has 20 or 30 years of experience. And when you kind of conceptualize it that way, you start to realize the value of these is really replacing that first year associate, replacing that paralegal, replacing that first or second draft, and then you take it the rest of the way. And you're not wrong when you say that you're taking it from 2 weeks down to 2 hours, or from $15,000 down to $200 a month. And if you're not taking advantage of an efficiency gain like that, you're going to fall behind really fast.
Yeah, and that's not to scare everybody and to think that AI is coming for people's jobs. It's just like one of the examples I like to give. I don't know, Gio, are we allowed to swear on this? Okay, all right. So who remembers the job of a shit shoveler? And I like to swear there because of the alliteration. I usually don't really swear. But the shit shoveler was, back in the horse and buggy days, people would come along and shovel the shit, right? And like get it out of the street, for the horse and buggies coming along. Motor vehicles got rid of that job. I don't think anybody's complaining too much about that, right? So AI is going to get rid of jobs. Just like any giant technological leap gets rid of jobs. But it's jobs that, like, maybe we're better off not doing anyway, right?
I want to push back a little bit, Matthew. This is something I've been exploring. I don't know where I fall on it yet, but I tend to agree that this lump of labor fallacy, as they call it, that because there's a new invention or a new technology, it's going to take away all the jobs, is wrong. I do currently believe that. But where I want to push back is here, that for the first time in human history, we're replacing the one advantage that humans have. In other words, we're apex predators because of our ability to think. Every other technological breakthrough that we've had in the past has replaced some physical limitation. So, you think about like the tall tales from when I was a kid. You have Paul Bunyan chopping down trees, and he can't keep up physically. Every invention and every innovation up to this point has replaced physical labor, something that humans do, but not as well as animals. Humans do, but it's not. Shit shoveler, for instance. It's not what gives us our advantage. So for the first time, we're replacing the one thing that gives human beings an advantage: intelligence. And so how is that going to affect it's different this time model, right? It's never different. We always have some innovation, and it never replaces all the jobs. It makes new jobs. But this time we're replacing the one thing that makes us unique, our ability to think. And so I wonder how that's going to play into the future of work.
That's perhaps the most well-reasoned and explained version of that take that I think I've ever heard, Jonathan.
Well, I appreciate that.
Yeah, Jonathan, brilliant. But I'm troubled with this, and I've said it for the last years at our meetings, and that is, I really fear, not just for the practice, I really fear for our humanity also, because as we've been hearing from the leaders in technology for the last couple of months, the soft landing, so to speak, of artificial intelligence has really gotten to the point where it's replacing how we think. It's thinking faster than human beings, and it's got a lot more knowledge than any of us do. I don't want to get into a philosophical discussion about it, but sometimes I really feel for our humanity and really think that the age of the Terminator is upon us. But we're still young enough that we're going to be able to adapt to it, I hope.
Here's my response, Jonathan.
Plotnik and I are washed up.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. So here, my response to that, to what you articulated, Jonathan, is typing replaced penmanship. Now, you could argue that is a physical thing, but I think that's more intellectual than physical. Writing. Those are your thoughts manifest, right? AI is just the next level of that, but 100x'd, right? Like, I maybe think a little differently because I'm typing versus writing, right? And to those of us who have lived through that transition, of which I am an elder millennial, I turned 37 tomorrow. I was there. Like, I still handwrote essays, like in school, right? There is something to be said about handwritten notes still, but I don't think that's because there's something inherent to handwritten notes. That's inherent to the neural pathways that I developed because I grew up still using penmanship. I think that AI will accelerate human intellectual capabilities, not inhibit them. I really do, because as the three of us know on this panel that we're using these AI tools all the time, you get better output, the best output, the more critical thinking you do prior to using the tool, during the use of the tool, analyzing the output of the tool. That's more thinking. It's higher level thinking. So I actually think that, and education has to change to adapt to that. But and it's going to be a world of abundance. We're going to be able to focus on things like art, like making art, doing live performances, like the robots. I don't want to watch robots perform Shakespeare. I want to watch humans perform Shakespeare. So like if you have kids, what should they go study? Maybe the arts.
Yeah, I don't, again, necessarily disagree with you. It's been something I've been mulling around. And, I think the one thing that your response left out, though, was the replacement aspect of it. In other words, when I think about these things, I think about it, and actually you in one of your LinkedIn posts made me kind of start to think about this was, people say, is it going to replace the billable hour? And there's always this stark contrast where some people say yes and some people say no. And the reason I think that they do that is some people are conceptualizing AI as it exists in this moment and what it's capable of versus where it's going. And, as we move down the spectrum from what it's capable of doing now, enhancing human thought, eventually I think we get to a place where it starts to replace human thought. And, we kind of saw that happen with the internet in a really weird microcosm. And let me flesh that out just a little bit, that, we went from very distinct eras, right? Where, so from a cultural standpoint, instead of an intelligence standpoint, where if you saw a picture of the 50s, it's the 50s. You see a picture of the 60s, it's the 60s, 70s, 80s, all the way down to around 2010 sometime, mid 2000 to 2010 to present. All of a sudden, you don't see those same cultural differences. And that's because I think as a society, we really gave over our culture to electronics in a certain way, to where now the internet kind of dictates what culture looks like, and it all looks the same. It's not the same distinctions that it used to have. And I think that when you move from that kind of cultural example to a intelligence example, you're going to start to see LLMs do kind of the same thing in our thought process. It's going to more or less take it over. And especially as agents become more autonomous and we turn over, for instance, a full case to an agent, and we're just appearing in court based on what it's telling us to do. I think that Gio's concerns are very realistic concerns. I didn't mean to get too philosophical there, Gio, but I think that I think I did.
It's all right. Sometimes we get tired of just talking about which agents to use. All right. So we've covered which agents that you guys are using on a day-to-day basis. Is there anything else that you think practitioners should be looking at?
Yeah, I want to go back to, again, one of the things you said, Gio, about the information that you give the model. As far as core competencies required to use AI, understanding the significance of prompting and the significance of including documents as part of what the AI is going to review is very, very important. And, as people start to use these models, and maybe if they're using them for the first time, my advice would be to start off by telling the LLM what it is. In other words, when you're maybe researching the law, start off, if you're using, again, an OpenAI model or just a vanilla model, by saying you are an attorney. You are an attorney in Illinois. You are a seasoned attorney who's been practicing for 30 years in whatever area of practice you're having it research. And then compare the results to what you got by just asking the question. And I think you'll be stunned by the difference. And that same thing holds true with, if you're researching, for instance, a medical malpractice issue. One of the things that I've started to do is I've put together these projects. And can I share my screen, Gio, so I can show where this exists on the OpenAI platform?
Sure. Go ahead and share.
So let me find where I put that now.
While Jonathan finds that, I will just echo that, we learn about giving the AI a persona. You are a judge. You are a juror. How do you perceive this? Or you're a potential client. But telling the AI who you are, even in legal specific AI tools, I still do that. I am an attorney. This is my client. This is what we're trying to accomplish. Identify the most problematic clauses in this master services agreement based on that context. Really crucial.
That's exactly right. Yeah, and in a way you can take that further is you can go into, and this is ChatGPT, OpenAI's product. You can go in and create a project, law project. Okay. And you can even identify what you're trying to do here. So maybe we'll do writing and create your project. And one of the nice features that this has is you can go to this add files button. And what I tend to do is if I'm looking up a medical malpractice issue, I download the CLE from ICL, which you can download as a PDF. I've got it all merged together here, and then I upload it. And so now when I ask this model a question, it's going to rely on and cite to the medical malpractice IICLE 2022. And if anybody's familiar with the IICLE website, there's every practice of law or every area of law that you could ever want has a CLE on there. So now when you ask it a question, you can say, again, you're an attorney, and you can actually tell it, limit your response to the attached documents. And so what that simple command will do will limit whatever the next question I ask to those documents. So you can ask, what is the standard of care for a physician mean? And when you type that in, what it'll do is go through that entire document. It will, again, act as an attorney when it's coming up with its response. And it then will cite to the medical malpractice CLE exactly where it found it, and will give you all of the answers from that CLE. So what you're really given the ability to do is interact with the CLE on medical malpractice. It's a great way to start research, to where you used to maybe go to the table of contents. You used to have to kind of find it, read through it. Now you can have a conversation about it. Same as Gio was talking about, like a first-year associate, you're saying, go research this for me, but you get to give it the sources you want it to use. And I find this to be, as far as beginning a research project, to be one of the most powerful tools possible. And especially if you kind of know where the information you want is. And then you can ask it, later on, go outside and, I'm not going to sit here and type it all out, but you can say, go outside and find me more information. It'll go to the internet and research it for you, and so on. And so, again, a really great tool, and something that I think not a lot of people are aware of is this projects that exist within the OpenAI tools. Something I use all the time.
Look, I just learned that because I'm not in ChatGPT, right? And so I didn't know that you could restrict the answers based off of documents inside of ChatGPT in that format. Again, even back as soon as you could include an attachment in ChatGPT, I was attaching a lot of stuff. I was just copying and pasting a ton of stuff. Little did I find that I learned about a context window. And then I wasn't Claude, because Claude at the time, this was like 2 years ago now, had the largest context window. So I was putting these big legal documents in, taking out confidential or client identifying information and putting in these big legal documents. And I needed to use Claude because it had a large context window. But this concept, Jonathan, what you just did, is still lost on most attorneys and most people using AI, which is if they just think, well, it must have access to that PDF. So I'm just going to ask it, and it will draw from that PDF. No. And even if it illegally crawled the ICL website, and ingested that PDF into its training data, that's also still not good enough, because that would be like asking a human who prepared for an exam and read all the course material to take a closed book test. Are you going to perfectly take out that training data from the human? These are not calculators. These are not deterministic models. 2 + 2 = 4 is objective. It will always be the same answer. These are language models. They're based on language. We made it up. We made up language. It's probabilistic. And so it's not deterministic. So even if the training data is there, it's not going to be verbatim what it was trained on.
On a simplified level, I want to just make sure that everybody understands that there is becoming an art to the prompts. By prompts, I mean the information you give the AI to give it context for what you want it to do. It is almost an art form now that you have to learn how to practice. You have to learn how to develop. There are places on the internet that give you suggestions on how to prompt for different things. It's well worth the time to learn how to do the prompting.
It
No,
showed
you're
what
exactly.
Jonathan showed is like you don't just prompt, you give it information.
Well, that's
Yeah, and you also keep in mind that, in I think Matthew was touching on this. He's calling it context window. It's the context window is the area where you put the prompt, so everybody here understands what that means. And what you're doing when you put the document attached, like I did, it's actually taking the entire document in the background. You don't see it as the user, making that part of the prompt. Okay, and so also just super important to understand that not only can you have more information in your prompts in order to get better results, but also kind of like Gio's touching on the way you phrase it, the what you tell it what it is. And I mean, you can take it to extremes, and there's some Twitter accounts I follow that show really, really interesting prompts where they'll do them in almost a computer code called JSON that will get incredible results. I mean, just absolutely incredible results. And I'm not suggesting everybody in this room should learn JSON and prompt that way. But what is important to understand is that learning how to prompt, even the very basics of prompting, things like telling the model what it is before you ask the question, you are a lawyer, will go from mediocre results to excellent results. And that's really the takeaway when it comes to prompting. Never underestimate how important it is the way you phrase the question and what information you give the model. It's very, very important. And also keep in mind that the model is only going to remember the information you gave it when you're within the instance that you're using it. So if you create a new chat, all of that old information that you've been talking with it about is gone. You can go back to it, of course, but at the same time, I conceptualize it like long-term and short-term memory, where
Yes.
the AI's long-term memory is its training data, the things that it's been trained on. The model maybe cuts off April of 2025, whatever the date is. But you always have the ability to give it short-term memory. And that short-term memory is exactly what it sounds like. It'll never turn into long-term memory. But as long as you keep the short-term memory running, it will give you results based on the conversation and the context that you put into it.
And long-term memory is not perfect recall. And that's really important to understand.
Yeah, that's a good point. I like
I,
that.
I do not want any answers exclusively based off training data. You need the training data because that's how it comprehends unstructured data like what's in a contract or a PDF or a statute or whatever. But if it's for me, not even just for law, but for my personal life, like when I'm looking up what's this thing on my kid's stomach, it's like, oh, it's a molluscum. Like I want it giving me citations to wherever it's getting that information from. Yes, training data is important, but the sources, the ground truth, the short-term memory, as Jonathan put it, I still think is crucial to giving a more accurate answer that we as lawyers in our work is an absolute must.
That's exactly right. And it's also important to keep in mind that there's really great tools that already exist in order to augment that short-term memory in easy ways. In other words, you don't necessarily have to go to CLE's website to download it. And I'll show you where that exists again on OpenAI. If you go down to this button right here, you can tell it what tools to use. And when you're telling it what tools, let me do a new instance here. So up here, you pick your model, okay? And then, this is a free account. I don't have my other one but you should have the ability. Yes. So web search, for instance, is one of those tools. Canvas is another one of those tools. Deep research is an incredibly powerful tool. But what these do is they'll go out to the internet and search. So again, in your context window, your prompt, what you want to do if you're using one of these tools that are augmenting short-term memory is limit where it goes to. So for instance, if you say, go to the internet and, research a certain legal issue, you can follow up by saying, but limit your sources to .edu or limit your sources to scholarly articles. Don't use anything that seems questionable. And I know that sounds very conversational, but at the same time, we're having a conversation with the thing, and you can really limit what it's going out and doing, where it's searching the web, for instance, to high credibility sources as opposed to pulling from just any website simply by telling it to. And again, you can also tell it to include citations after each point, and it'll also do that. So if you are using these tools to augment short-term memory, make sure that you do it in a limiting way. Otherwise, it'll go to the entire internet and pull whatever, Reddit thread that it finds first. But you can limit that by telling it only use high credibility sources. And I think you'll find, again, with these simple prompting changes, you'll get much better results.
agreed.
And the reason I use Perplexity to do that is because I want to do less prompting, and it's designed to do that web-based search, right? So like I've just replaced using Google with, if I'm going to look for things on the internet, I just use Perplexity because that's what it's designed for. So I don't have to do all that prompting. Now, some people might want to just pay for one tool, and they're like ChatGPT, and they like all that other stuff you could do, but you can't do all that stuff in Perplexity because it's designed purpose first for internet search and answer.
The only thing I
Yeah,
want to add in terms of people doing this, you have, it's just like learning how to type. You could you could learn the keyboard, but you're only going to get good at it by using it and using it over and over again. It's a skill. So you have to start using whatever model you're going to use. You have to start using it and using it repeatedly and learn how to adjust it and teach it. And it's like anything else any other skill that you learn. This is a whole new skill set for all of us.
there's some comments that I just want to touch on that people are putting in the comments, Gio. We'll go most recent first because somebody said, "Will Hal throw us out to space, or our court decisions will be made by Judge Dredd?" And I actually had a LinkedIn post about this because it dawned on me recently. Like in sci-fi, it's like, "I'm sorry, I can't do that for you," is what like Hal says. But like in the real world, AI is like, "I'm sorry, you've run out of you hit your usage limits for the day. Come back later." That's kind of the reality. It's like AI is not what we thought it was in sci-fi, at least right now. And then going back to the earlier question is about how people are basically lazy, and so that's why they don't check their output. And I think you're absolutely right. And who is it? Bill Gates or like somebody said they always look for the laziest person on the team because they're going to find the most efficient way to do something. So there is benefit to laziness, right? Because like why are we spending all this energy doing something? And I think that's more evolutionary and biological than anything else. We'd expend the least amount of energy to get good enough output. But I think just the curriculum needs to be updated, right? I was talking to an econ teacher for high school recently who said even a simple activity like let's put people together in groups of 5 in the class and come up with a team name. And the point is not to come up with a name. The point is for them to talk to each other and have a conversation or whatever. And what are they doing? They're just going to ChatGPT and say, give us some team names, and they pick one, right? So like it's not about the team name. It's about the exercise. So what do you do in that situation? Well, what I would recommend is you say, okay, you guys want to use ChatGPT? Great. Everyone on the team gets to use it, and then you have to take the output, and I need to see the results from all the ChatGPT output, and then you together come up with a hybrid name that's based off of what you find from ChatGPT, right? So instead of saying you can't use it or don't use it, that just makes kids want to use it anyway. You make them use it, you incorporate it into part of the lesson and work with it and be like, oh, you prompted it to be like that. Well, here's a way that you could have done it to get better results. So you just have to teach them how to use it and incorporate it to be part of the lesson. Same thing is true for law school.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And one of the ways that I actually was doing that just last night with my kids, and I can pull this up and show it. Um,
Let me
my
interject.
son,
If anybody's got
yeah,
any questions, please throw them into the chat line. We're going to try to get to your questions, comments.
but I think a really great way to kind of show an example of what Matthew's talking about is my son was doing math last night, and I wanted to check it, but was kind of lazy. And so I was thinking about easy ways to check it as opposed to just pulling out a calculator, so that's not easy enough. So what I did was I took a picture of the page. Here it is. And then I just hit return. I didn't even tell it what to do. It just intuited what I wanted. And it went through every problem and told me if he was right or if he was wrong and broke down what it was. So again, it's kind of like what Matt's saying is that it doesn't mean he didn't do the math, but it didn't mean that I, as the parent, didn't have to check each problem one by one. It just went through and kind of augmented that whole process for me. But also goes to what Gio's saying. If you start to use these models, the more you start to use them, the more kind of creative methods you'll come up with as far as how they might be useful in life or how they might be useful in work. And believe me when I tell you, any parent in the room knows that taking a picture of a math sheet and just asking the AI to tell me what's wrong with it makes it a lot easier for helping the boys correct their mistakes.
All right.
Amazing.
Any other comments? How about I'm going to do this? I'm going to open it up to everybody so everybody could see everybody.
Jonathan, they're asking to see, you show them one more time how to upload a document under the project section. Somebody's asking for that.
Okay.
So you go to chat.com or chatgpt.com, both work. Both will take you to the same website, which will look like this when you first get here. You'll have to sign in to use the project capability. Um, You go to new project, tell it whatever you want it to be, maybe appeal work. Then here you can pick, and what this is doing is just changing again the kind of background prompt to make it more health oriented, travel oriented. I pick writing since what we're doing is research and writing. You go to add files, and you have to download the PDF from the IICLE's website. They tend to go by chapters, and then I merge the chapters. You can upload them as individual chapters, but for ease, just upload them that way. So now you've added this file into your project files. And so the next step would again be telling it it's a lawyer, maybe an Illinois lawyer, an Illinois appeals lawyer would even be better. And then telling it to limit its responses to the attached documents. And so that attach button again is up here. And then you can prompt from there. And if you tell it to limit its responses to those, it will certainly do that. And then you're not stuck with that instruction the rest of this chat, just that prompt. And so the next prompt you can say, okay, now that you've limited it to that, I'd like you to do some more research. Go to websites, but only go to websites that are credible. Only go to Illinois cases from illinoiscourts.gov or illinoiscourts.com. They tend to post all of the appellate cases there, and the AI will have access to those cases and will limit its search to that for you in the background. So those are different methods to kind of get to maybe some more up-to-date cases as well.
Yeah, and then if I can, really quick here, I'd like to show the Notebook LM equivalent of that just really fast here. All right, so everybody could see that, I hope. So this is Notebook. This is Google Gemini's purpose-built product for that. So you could do all that, what Jonathan just showed, inside of Gemini directly, Google Gemini. But I like Notebook LM because it's specifically designed to not go outside your sources. And so you could go here to add that source, and you could add a Google Doc, a Google slide, website, any website link, YouTube videos, and any copy and pasted text. And you could download PDFs, .txt files, markdown, audio, MP3s. And what it does with the MP3s is it transcribes it, and then it uses the text from the transcript. That's what it's doing with YouTube too. It's not multimodal. I don't think it's like analyzing video. It's just analyzing text or transcript. And what is interesting here is this is the one thing where it goes outside of the Notebook to go look at things on the internet, is you click that Discover Sources button. And then you could search within your own Google Drive, which actually, this is new. I haven't seen this yet because I usually don't do Discover Sources, so I'm learning something new on the fly. This didn't used to be here. Discover Sources just used to be just for the web, but now it looks like I could search my Google Drive. I could already think if I'm going to start using this. But for web, I could say I'm new to AI. Please find the top 10 most reliable training videos. You don't even need to get the text spelled exactly right, on YouTube for me. And so now instead of me going and watching a bunch of YouTube videos, I could bring in those YouTube videos, because again, YouTube is a Google product, Notebook LM is a Google product, and I could go look at these if I want, but I'm just going to import them. And now what I could do is, instead of watching all these YouTube videos, I could create an audio overview, a video overview that synthesizes all of this content into a single video or a single audio, or I could start mind mapping it or generate reports, study guides, blog posts, briefing docs. I can make them my own. I actually really like the study guide feature because it creates a glossary of terms or definitions. And so for if we get a new contract or something, if you're a transactional lawyer like me and there's a bunch of undefined terms, throw it into Notebook, use the study guide, and boom, you've got all your terms defined. And it's not perfect, but it gets you 90% of the way there, which just saves a boatload of time. It gives you this high-level summary of all of these things, and you could just start asking questions, where do I start? I'm new at this. And, go ahead. I don't know, did somebody speak up? Sorry. So here you go. So welcome, thanks for learning about artificial intelligence, right? And it gives me a step-by-step guide. It tells me about where it's getting the sources from, which is what I love about Notebook, right? And then it'll pull you to that source, wherever it is. Now, the thing about YouTube videos is sometimes they don't always find the exact part of the transcript. But here you can see it's bringing up side by side. So if this were a legal document, it would pull up the legal document. It would look like this, and I'm in dark mode. If you don't like dark mode, there's a white mode. But then you could actually see the actual text in the document side by side with whatever the analysis is. So anyway, that's how that works.
Great suggestion. Okay, we got a couple of minutes left. How about any other questions, comments, snide remarks?
We love the snide remarks.
Yep, I'm Ed Walsh, and I'm retired now, formerly a trial lawyer representing plaintiffs in DuPage County and Cook County. And I've said this to Geo many times that this is the only thing that's ever come about that has wanted me to return to the practice of law. This is the most exciting thing I have experienced since, the internet impacted our practice and getting into case management. I envy all of you practicing lawyers to still being able to use this. And I thank you for sharing your knowledge with me, and specifically Geo and the Northwest Suburban Bar.
Thank you, Ed.
Thanks, Ed.
Mazar, you got everything recorded for you? Get enough notes on this? How many note-taking apps do you have going at the same time?
My goal is to have as many as possible. So I think I'm going to have to go through like half a dozen transcripts when this is done.
Well, you can synthesize them. Matthew
Exactly.
showed you how to
I'm
synthesize
going to
them.
them in Notebook LM, and my Notebook LM is going to have a conversation about it.
Right.
I got before I went to law school, I got an MBA back in prehistoric times. It didn't seem prehistoric back then, but anyway, what you all are talking about back then, it was the buggy whip industry. I think, who was it? Somebody talked about shit shovelers. It was the buggy whip industry. The automobile came around and people freaked out because there was a whole industry making buggy whips. In Japan, they had the same experience when movies took on sound, because the silent movies, the Japanese actually had a sort of a master of ceremonies. And that was his job. His job was to say, okay, this is what's happening now, and whatever, stuff like that. That job was eliminated. This is going to happen all the time. It's what Schumpeter, the philosopher, called creative destruction.
Mm-hmm.
It's just going to happen. And, and by the way, Ed Walsh.
Yes, good to see you.
Yes, good to see you, sir. You know what? Being retired is better. Just take my word for it.
Well, I'll say this. I'm now a horseman and a land steward. I love what I am doing, but I also love practicing law. So,
but Ed, you're shoveling a lot of shit because you're raising those horses.
yeah. Good
Hey, are
point.
you guys going to be at the small business, the ISBA thing that's coming up
In Naperville?
in Naperville?
Can't make it
No.
this year.
All right.
No, I don't think I'm going to be there.
No, we weren't invited to speak.
Big,
All right.
big mistake by that group.
All right. Well, everybody, thank you. I'm going to stop recording